What is up, all you individuals out there? It's me, full-time anime man, and first thing I'd like to say is Merry Christmas to everyone. I hope you're all sitting in your houses, nice and warm, and next to the fire or near your furnace. Anyway, I just have a new what if idea here for you, and I wanted to share with you all on Christmas Day. Now, I see that we are near 4,000 subscribers, and we've been kind of sitting there for the past few weeks. So let's go ahead and get to 4,000 subscribers. With that, let's go ahead and get into the story. This is What If Deku Had a Shadow Wolf? Hope you all enjoy. Before we get started with this story, I think it's important that we all know a thing or two about Norse mythology. Let's talk about Fenrir, otherwise known as Fenris Ulfr. He goes by many names, and one of them being the World Devourer, but we all know him as the giant wolf, Fenrir. Fenrir is the offspring to Loki, the god of mischief, who is also known as the brother of Thor, the god of thunder. Loki had a main wife named Sigyn, and he had two normal children named Vali and Narfi. But what Sigyn didn't know was that Loki was leading a double life with a woman named Agrabota, who was a giantess, and with Loki's affair, the two created creatures that we all know, such as Hel, the queen of the dead, and Jormungandr, the world serpent. But none of them could compare to Loki's firstborn, Fenrir, the monstrous wolf of Norse mythology. Ever since he was a cub, the gods did not fear Fenrir. They allowed him to walk amongst Asgard freely, but one day, Odin was informed that Loki's son, Fenrir, would be his downfall, to which Odin laughed off, thinking that there's no way that this small pup could actually bring him down. Little did he know he would come to regret those words in the future, for as time passed, Fenrir would grow in size, bigger than the average man, bigger than a house. Each day that he passed, it was like he was getting bigger and bigger. Could his strength be increasing as well, he may have been thinking? To which this concerned the gods, and made them worry about what would happen if Fenrir turned on them for any reason. And so, other than doing their best to make Fenrir an ally of theirs, they devised a plan. They went to Fenrir one day and told him that they want to give him a challenge to test his strength, and that if he was able to break a certain amount of chains while being barricaded towards a rock, he will earn himself a spot in Valhalla and will be given fame. Without even a second thought, Fenrir accepted this challenge and allowed the gods to wrap the chains around him, tying him to a rock. And without even breaking a sweat, Fenrir bursted through these chains, freeing himself. The gods would give Fenrir challenge after challenge. Each day he would just grow stronger and stronger. It was like no source material that they would use would be able to hold this wolf in place. The gods would fear that there would be nothing that they could use against Fenrir that would actually stop him. Odin refused to give up. He would go to the dwarves and demand them that they create something that is unbreakable, something that they can use to tie Fenrir with. The dwarves would be successful in their task, and the gods would tell Fenrir that they have one more challenge for him before he could truly be a part of their group and accepted into Valhalla. Fenrir would be suspicious of this new material that they had brought to him. It was like it was made out of cloth instead of the normal chains, and he had some suspicions that this would either be a little bit too easy, that it might be impossible to break out of. And so it was with those suspicions that he denied it at first. The gods would proceed to call Fenrir a coward, but Fenrir, wanting to prove them wrong, accepted their challenge under one condition: that one of them would place their hand in his mouth as a sign of trust. The gods denied this request at first, but Tyr, the one who stepped up towards Fenrir and looked after him, would oblige to his demands. And so, as the hand of Tyr sat in the warm, wet mouth of Fenrir, the gods wrapped Fenrir with this weird cloth. And as light began to emanate around these strange bandages, Fenrir almost immediately knew that something was awry. He would then try to break himself from this material, but it was like every time he tried, it would get tighter and tighter, and it was like just choking him, squeezing the absolute life out of him. And when Fenrir sensed deception, he tore Tyr's arm from his body. The gods would proceed to laugh at Fenrir, calling him a fool, and actually mocking him, even thinking that they would even allow him into their group. The gods would drag Fenrir away deep into the earth, and as one more act of cruelty, one of the gods then placed a sword into the poor wolf's mouth, so that it will never close, creating a river of his own drool. Fenrir would stay there for a very long time, until the day of Ragnarok, where all bonds, including the ones that hold him to that rock, will be broken. Now that we got Fenrir's story out the way, let's talk about his children, Skoll and Hati. After doing as much research as possible, I have found that Fenrir mated with an unnamed Vargr, one of Agrabot's wolves, which gave birth to Skoll and Hati. After Odin heard about Fenrir's children, he captured the poor pups, imprisoned them, and over time they began to resemble their father's look and size. And one day, Odin saw that the god and goddess of the sun and moon were moving slowly, making day and night very, very long. Odin cast the wolves to the skies. Skoll chased the sun, Sol, and Hati chased the moon goddess, Mani. It is also said that once they are successful in their mission, it will bring about the wrath of Ragnarok, which will set their father free. Now that we have that out the way, let's talk about Hati for a moment. Hati's name is another word for he who hates. This wolf would chase the moon goddess Mani, and you might be happy to know that the stories of Norse mythology, Hati is seen as a girl. Now, let's go ahead and get into the juicier details of the story. Obviously, we will be making a few changes to the story of Norse mythology, just so that the narratives in the story could fit and intertwine with each other. First thing is that Odin cursed Skoll and Hati with immortality, so that they chase the sun and moon for all of eternity. And with up to date on how long they have been chasing the sun and moon, I have estimated that it has been probably 5,000, maybe going on 6,000 years. Also, a thing that might be important to mention is that Norse gods are able to die. Like, they can get sick, they can get hurt, they can age. And so, with thousands of years that have gone by, there's no doubt that they're all gone. Or are they? Anyway, I'm going to display a list of Izuku's powers. These powers will come as the story progresses, and obviously we will start small and work our way up. Anyway, I've spoken long enough. Let's go ahead and get into the story. This is What If Deku Had a Shadow Wolf? Hope you all enjoy. This story starts with the surface of the moon. We zoom in and see the moon goddess and Hati fighting on its surface. Hati would be trying to lunge at her opponent, but the moon goddess would use her powers to blast Hati away. It is futile to try, Hati. You have to understand that you cannot defeat me. Hati gets back up and says, Yes, I can! Soon, I will devour you. My brother will consume the sun, and Ragnarok will happen, and my father will be free! Mani says, You really don't know, don't you? Know what? Hati, your hatred for the gods have consumed you so much, you haven't even noticed how long it's been, haven't you? Hati, it's been 5,000 years. The gods are all dead. What? No, you're lying. You're trying to trick me, like Odin and everyone else did to my father. I am telling you the truth, child. You can't die because Odin cursed you, me, my brother, and your brother with immortality. We are forced to walk around this earth forever. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. That is the way that things are now. Hati thinks for a moment. No, I refuse to let my guard down for even a moment. I will eat the moon, and soon my brother will eat the sun, and our father will be free and get the revenge that he so deserves. How dare you lie to me? How dare you? Hati then lunges at Mani. She retaliates and uses her powers to smack Hati deep into the moon's core. She finds herself in an open space, and soon she was greeted by a mysterious light. She looks and sees a small crystal with a glowing light of black, as this aura that shapes it was silhouetted white. Hati could sense great power coming from this crystal. This is where the moon goddess gets her powers from, is it? There's only one way to find out, and since it's a small pebble, I am able to swallow it. And with that, Hati does swallow the Mani's moon crystal, and expected something to happen, like for her to get the powers of the moon herself, but sadly, nothing happened. Suddenly, she hears footsteps from behind her. The moon goddess walks towards her and grabs her by the back of her neck and says, Fine, you don't have to believe me. But I do suppose that this is something that you would have to witness for yourself. She then takes her to the surface of the moon and shows her the earth. That world has no gods. No more, at least. But rather, everyone down there lives freely. But there is something new. For evolution has changed their genetic coding, and each person on that earth lives with their own skills that may resemble gods, but will never be greater than ones. But now, you shall experience that yourself. I'm going to remove your immortality, and I am going to send you down there, so that you may live amongst the humans. She raises Hati up and also reveals a small orb in her other hand, a black orb that gave off this weird, spacious feeling of an empty void. Mani says, I'm going to put you in this orb, and whatever life comes in contact with it, you will become one with that living being and live amongst the humans. And you will see that I am telling you the truth, Hati. Hati says, there is nothing that you can say or do that will change my mind on how I feel about you bastards. I will be the harbinger of Ragnarok, and my father will have his vengeance. This I promise you, Mani. We shall see about that. She then puts Hati inside the small orb and speaks to it. To whatever comes in contact with this orb, inside it will fuse with that living creature. Just as she's about to send the orb down to Earth, she then caught a quick glimpse of light from this orb that Hati was inside of, but She immediately brushed it off, thinking that the stone was just emitting its power. She then throws the orb to the earth, and it enters the earth's atmosphere, which caused it to catch fire, heading straight to Japan. We then appear on the earth's ground. A woman with long green hair walks through the forest with a t-shirt that says, "Make it green again." She was a part of a nature preserve group when they would try to save the earth and bring green back into it. One day, this green-haired woman was walking through the forest for anything to report back to her group. If trees were planning to be cut down unnecessarily, or any unnecessary businesses planned to place buildings there in the wooden area. While walking through the woods, the green-haired woman heard what sounded like a cub in distress. She follows the sound and saw a Canis Lacoya. I'm sorry if I'm saying the name of this wolf wrong, but it's a black-furred wolf, just so you know. This small black-furred wolf in a toothless coil spring trap. Oh no, you poor thing, are you okay? Here, let me get that off. The green-haired woman would then use her fingers to pry the trap open and setting the cub free. The little cub would have a little trouble walking, for it was in too much pain for where its leg was stuck. She then picks the cub up. Oh, it's gonna be okay. Here, I'm gonna take you back to my group, and we're gonna heal you up. Okay? As she slowly pats the little wolf cub on top of its head, she suddenly hears a growl behind her. She turns around and sees a fully grown, dusky wolf. That's just another name for black wolf. It was the mother, and she was angry that this woman touched and, by the looks of it, hurt her child. The green-haired woman started shaking in her shoes while trying her best to stand completely still and explain that she was simply trying to help her baby in an attempt to, well, not get eaten. But of course, the mother does not understand a word that this human woman is saying. She starts exposing her teeth and growls loudly. The hair on her back stands straight up, and fury roars in her eyes. She starts showing even more signs of aggression, and the woman falls backwards with the cub still in her arms, and the mother then lunges at her, but before it could actually reach her, it started letting out cries of pain, and it started stumbling around. Then the wolf cub started crying out while squirming around in the green-haired woman's arms. "What's going on?" said the green-haired woman. She couldn't hear it, but from above, a high-pitched sound can be heard, and it hurt all creatures who had a high sense of hearing. The wolf mother then ran away, leaving the woman and her wolf cub alone. The cub was still crying and wallowing around in the woman's arms. "What's the matter?" Suddenly, the woman heard what sounded like a sonic boom from up above. She looks, and she sees what appears to be a meteorite falling from the sky. It crashed just a few feet away from her. When the smoke cleared, the woman looked, and she sees a deep crater with what appears to be a giant black orb, not about as big as her torso. Her curiosity got the best of her. With the wolf pup still in her arms, she crawled into the crater and closer to the black orb. She was so drawn by it. It was almost as if it was speaking to her. "Touch me." The woman couldn't help it. She then reached out with her hand and was about to touch it, but she didn't notice that the wolf cub was just about to touch it too. And at the same time, the two then touched the orb, and the orb expanded out, engulfing both of them. But before it could completely engulf the woman's scream was muffled in just a second as the ball engulfed her. From the moon, Mani sensed that the orb was activated. Oh, I must say that was very quick. Oh well, let us see. Oh, well this is interesting. I am sensing 2 new life beings inside of my orb. Not only is Hati in there, but a wolf cub and a woman, a human woman nonetheless. It could make more sense if Hati was the wolf cub, but I really want her to live amongst the human people. I have an idea. Mani would then tamper with all 3 of their DNAs. The woman, the cub, and Hati's. She would fuse their DNA. Well, she would fuse mostly Hati, the cub, and a little bit of the human's DNA into the wolf cub. This would give the wolf cub human skin and humanoid features such as arms, legs, even opposable thumbs, while still maintaining its wolf features, of course, with its ears being on top of her head and a wolf tail. After 9 days had passed, Mani had finally set the woman and the humanoid wolf cub free from the orb. The green-haired woman then gasped very deeply as if she was holding her breath for a very, very long time. When she finally calmed down, she asked herself, "What happened? Where am I?" But when she had saw that her hair had waved in her face, she had noticed that her hair was no longer green. It was completely black. What happened to my hair? Suddenly, the woman heard crying in her arms. She slowly looked down and she saw a baby with wolf ears and a tail. She would start freaking out, wondering, who put this baby in my arms? And this isn't my baby. I've never had a baby before. After a while, she would calm down, and she would walk back to the spot where her group was, only to see that they were gone. The baby would start crying again, and the now black-haired woman would not know what to do, but other than to hush the baby and gently rock it back and forth until it stopped crying. After walking for what felt like a few hours, the woman would make it back to her hometown and would be recognized by a lot of people, but she couldn't help but notice that she felt different. She would talk about how strange she felt, and she felt stronger. After a few more minutes of walking, people would start noticing the woman, calling her by name, Inko, and asking her where she's been. She's been missing for the past few days, and when did you have a baby? Inko would explain what happened, and a lot of people would find it hard to believe. Anyway, they would call in an ambulance for her, and they would take her to the hospital. She and the baby would be thoroughly examined. And after the doctors looked over her and the baby, the doctors have discovered that the child that Inko brought with her, the child that she does not remember even having, does in fact have her DNA inside of it. Inko would be surprised, trying her best to put together what happened and how this baby came to be. The doctors talked about the baby, such as its obvious appearance, but its shadow is completely different though. What do you mean? Asked Inko. The doctor explained that they looked at the photo of the baby in case that just in case she wanted to see a picture of the baby, that when the flashlight hit her, her shadow was like that of a shape of a fully grown wolf projected on the wall. They even showed Inko the photo. She was a bit horrified at first, but she came to the assumption that perhaps it's a part of the baby's quirk, maybe? She rubbed it off. Soon, Inko was visited by her husband, Hasashi Midoriya. "Honey, are you okay? You've been missing for the past 9 days. Yes, Hasashi, I'm fine, but... But what? Something happened to me and I don't know how to explain it. Explain what? What happened? Inko would go on to explain the best that she could remember about what happened, about how she was engulfed in a black orb for, I guess, those 9 days that had remained. Hun, people don't just encounter a meteorite and end up with a baby. Then explain to me how this baby has my DNA inside of it. Hasashi then asks, have you been cheating on me? What? No, I have not been cheating on you, Hasashi. You saw me 9 days ago, and I wasn't pregnant. Now, I understand that's the first thing that comes to your mind, but pregnancy takes 9 to 10 months, and I was gone for 9 days. Hasashi then thinks for a second, and he finally comes to accept his wife's story. Okay, Inko, but what are we supposed to do about this baby? Should we put it up for adoption or something? I don't know, Hasashi. I think we might have to take care of it. Well, can I see her? Just as he said that, a nurse walked in with the baby in a tiny tub. The two then looked at the baby. Almost instantly, Hasashi fell in love with it because it did kind of look like Inko just a little bit. He even struggled to pick up the baby without thinking that his finger grips are going to hurt her or something. He doesn't know how fragile she is. She's just a baby. He just met her. He doesn't know what to do until Inko said, Hasashi, just pick her up. And he does. He holds her in his arms and starts gently rocking back and forth while waving his finger in front of her face. Hi there. The baby opens her eyes and he caught a faint glimpse of them. She has your eyes. Inko smiles and says, here, let me see her. She takes the baby and says, I'm not sure who you are, but I think that you're a gift from above. I believe that whatever great powerful being is out there, that they answer my prayer for a baby. I just didn't expect it to be this way, but I promise you, we're going to take good care of you. The screen fades to black, and a few days would pass. The two new parents would take care of the baby and would name her Izuki Midoriya. Allow me to spell that. Izukie. Midoriya. Everything seemed to be going pretty fine until one night, Mani, the moon goddess, had discovered that her powers were getting weaker. She went down to the spot where her power crystal would usually be, but when she got there, she saw that it was gone. She then comes to a realization that somehow Hati was the one who took it. She was the one who was down here last, therefore she must have it. She had to get her power back somehow because without it, she's just none other like any normal person. Only she could breathe in space and survive the vacuum of it. She then uses a little bit of the magic that she has to see where Izuki or Hati is with her powers. She wasn't able to see them because in order for her to see or truly feel the magic, Hati and Inko would have to be together in the same place. For you see, while Mani was messing around with Inko and Hati and the wolf's DNA, she also put a small remnant of Hati inside of Inko, meaning that the powers of the moon resides within her too. And if Izuki and Inko aren't together, it weakens her, making it hard for her to do, well, anything. But in this case, Inko had just gotten back from the store and is now at home with the baby in Hasashi's arms. She looked closer at the baby and she could just see the powers, her powers, inside of the baby. She had to get her powers back somehow, And unfortunately, for that to happen, there would only be one way. Izuki would have to die, which means that Hati would die. And hopefully, well, it honestly wasn't even a plan. She was just hoping that that would work. That killing the child and the wolf would bring her power back. But she also had to kill Inko just to make sure of it. She didn't want to harm this baby, but she felt like she didn't have a choice. She can't be the moon goddess if she only has a little itty-bitty speck of her power. She waited until midnight, when she would be fully seen in the eyes of the people. Inko, Hasashi, and Izuki would be asleep in their beds. Mani would use her powers of dream casting to make Inko see horrific things that involves her baby. She would see what looks like an apocalyptic world where fire and ice consumes everything, and two giants of those elements of fire and ice walking the earth, bringing about the extinction of all life on earth. She looks over, and standing on a building that was just tipping over, that looks like if it was just a feather tapped from falling over, stood on top was her daughter, Izuki, wearing clothes that blew in the wind's direction. And just as Inko thought that it was over, something slowly grows behind Izuki, and it looked like a giant black-figured wolf. The wolf figure then lunges at Inko, and she woke up in a cold sweat, heavily breathing as if she was running a marathon. Inko then got out of bed and opened the window to bring in some fresh air and stuck her head out the window. But when she looked up and saw the moon, she heard a voice. "Kill it." Inko's face then turned into a face that looked like it was under hypnosis. Inside Izuki's room, Izuki opened her eyes and she sees her mother with a large kitchen knife lifted over her head, ready to stab down. She cries, and this snaps Inko out of her trance. She then looks down at her crying baby, and she looks up at her hand, realizing that she was about to murder her. "What? No. No, I wouldn't. Why would I? What am I doing here?" Izuki continues to cry. "What's going on? Why would I want to?" Suddenly, Inko starts having visions of her dream. She tries to fight back, but Mani, who is trying to convince her to kill this child, Inko yells, "No! No, I won't do it! Stop! Stop it!" Inko then calls for Hasashi to come and help her. He quickly wakes up out of his sleep and runs towards the baby's room and sees that Inko is about to stab the baby, but he quickly stops her, grabbing a hold of her wrist, and the two wrestle over the knife for a while, but he manages to get the knife away from her. But in order for him to do that, he had to knock her out, because even with the knife out of her hands, she still tried to attack Izuki. The police took her away to a mental institution and was about to place her into the van, but before they could close the door, Mani used her powers one more time to force Inko to say these words. "That child is evil. It must be annihilated." Hasashi was now left alone with the baby, who has just stopped crying. Hasashi watches as the people take his wife away. He looks down at the baby, and he suddenly feels something off about it. This was the one last attempt of Mani, as she casted a small hex onto Hasashi. He wasn't sure what it was, but he felt a demonic evil from this child. Time would pass, and Hasashi would grow an unexpected hatred towards Izuki. Hasashi would neglect the poor baby, leaving her without food or baby milk for hours on end, only giving her attention whenever he wanted her to stop crying. More time would pass, making a year. Izuki, now 1 year old, and Hasashi had picked up drinking to drown out his sorrows and eventually became a full-on alcoholic. Izuki would be living in the worst conditions, always being left in her baby crib and left in a dirty diaper for hours on end. One night, Hasashi was feeding the baby while in a high chair, giving her spoon by spoon of baby food. While feeding her, Hasashi would be saying mean things to the baby that, if the baby were able to understand him, it would definitely hurt the baby's feelings. I'm starting to wish I had let her just kill you that night. That way she wouldn't be where she is. Maybe she had a reason for doing what she wanted to do. Maybe I should just finish it all. Hasashi stopped feeding Izuki and just started thinking to himself, no, that's not right. I shouldn't be thinking about that. What is wrong with me? Him doing that would make Izuki cry, for she was still hungry. This would set off something in Hasashi's head, and for the past few years, he's heard this baby's crying non-stop, robbing him of sleep and headaches. Hasashi would grow more and more annoyed by this thing's crying. At one point, he pushed the high chair over and Izuki's crying had stopped. Hasashi's ears were ringing. This eerie silence was driving him nuts. What have I done? Said Hasashi. He quickly picked up the baby and ushered her to the hospital, and a few hours would pass. And after Hasashi had finished explaining to the officers what had happened, telling them that it was an accident, the doctors would come out and they would tell Hasashi about the baby's condition, telling him that the baby had a fractured skull and a broken rib, but they were able to heal her from her injuries. But there was bad news. The doctors would go on to tell Hasashi that the baby's cerebrium is damaged from the fall, permanently messing up her nerves of communication. This makes it so that she will not be able to speak when she is older, or even ever again. Hasashi would begin to tear up. He thought about telling the police what actually happened and just taking responsibility, but he immediately brushed it off, thinking to himself, no one else can take care of this baby. I must be the only one who can. The doctor would tell Hasashi to please be more careful next time, and probably to just eat on the floor if they have to. And Hasashi would tell them that he will and that he promises. When the two get home, Hasashi's sad demeanor would turn into anger when the baby started crying. He would leave her in the living room while he went to his bedroom, trying to ignore the cries. On his shelf, he sees a bottle of alcohol and begins to drink again. This would go on for 3 years. Izuki would be treated horribly. Hasashi would try his best to not hit the child, but his alcohol problems would get the best of him. And honestly, it's hard to tell if the alcohol is really making him do this, or he genuinely hates the child with all of his being. He would treat her like a house dog. He would put food and water in a bowl and would place it on the floor for her to eat out of, not allowed to eat at the table. Whenever Izuki would have accidents, he would stick her nose in it and we'd begin to beat her while doing it. There even have been a number of times Hasashi has been doing things to her, but for my sake, I'm just going to say he inappropriately harassed her. And he would always say to himself that she's not my blood. What's the harm in doing so? And over time, Izuki would fall into a deep depression, and as the doctor said, she will never be able to speak and has never spoken a word yet in her time of existing. During her 4 years of existing, Izuki had never had a fair childhood. No birthday parties, no cartoons. She's never even seen kids her own age. She was always inside the house and never left. As a kid, she was always tasked to clean the house, to get her father a beer when asked, and do laundry, and if she did not complete her tasks on time, her father would punish her, or worse. One day, Hasashi was sent a letter demanding that Izuki sees a quirk doctor, otherwise they would have to come over and do a thorough police investigation. And Izuki, with all the bruises that are on her body, the doctors would definitely notice that there has been some conflict going on at home. Hasashi would use makeup to hide the bruises as best as he could, but looking in her eyes, he could see the cold emptiness that lies behind them. Hasashi would urge her to look her best, otherwise she will get punished again. They sit in the doctor's office and they wait. Soon the doctor comes in and they do take her away to thoroughly examine her. When the doctor physically examines her, they couldn't help but notice that there was makeup stains on her clothes. The doctor takes a closer look and he wipes off the discarded makeup and reveals her bruises all over her body. Hand marks, belt marks, even stick marks. A doctor then entered the room without Izuki, and he questioned the bruises. Hasashi would nervously tell the doctor that Izuki is really clumsy and tends to fall over and get herself hurt, but obviously the doctor was not having any of this. He reported Hasashi to Child Protective Services, and they held Izuki for a few days, to which she was actually treated right. She was constantly fed, and she met other kids her age who actually treated her nicely. And they even complimented her on her ears and tail. But one day, that was all taken away from her when the CPS agents took Izuki back to Hasashi. He had somehow convinced them that there was no abuse going on around the house. Hasashi then put a smile on his face when he saw her, and he hugged her to make his care look more sincere. "I'm so happy that you're home again," said Hasashi. Hasashi would turn his attention to the agents and would thank them for bringing her back. While they were talking, Izuki would look over and saw that the house was more cleaner than usual. I guess he really went above and beyond to prove that. But she would look around the corner and she sees the cage that Hasashi would put her in. There was bowl of food and water in there. Izuki's mind felt like it was going to split into two, for she was back in this mad house. She did not want to be here. These people brought her back. The ones who were supposed to protect her. The ones who took her away from the place that she was actually happy. Why would they bring her back here? She would then put both hands up to her head, trying to deal with this unbearable headache that rings in her head. She falls over trying to maintain her balance. The adults would ask her what's wrong, but Hasashi would hold her, asking her if she's okay. Izuki does not say anything as she looks into her father's eyes, and she just hates this man with all of her being. Hasashi then said, "Look, just in case, I'm going to take her to to the doctors just to make sure. Hasashi would then thank the two agents one last time before they leave, but before they do leave, he says to Izuki, "Wave goodbye, Izuki." She would then stare at the ground, and she would actually get 3 words out, but in great stumbling. Goodbye. Everyone would gasp. Hasashi would say, "Izuki, you're talking your first words." She would then finish her sentence. Father. The agents and Hasashi were confused. Goodbye, father. What does she mean? Sweetie, it's great to hear you speak your first words, but no, you're not supposed to say goodbye to me. You're supposed to say goodbye to... Hasashi looks down. A wolf shadowy head ushers from Izuki's back, and it latches its teeth onto his neck. It then relentlessly pulls, removing one of his jugulars. He falls to the ground, holding on to his wound. Blood is squirting everywhere. Some even got on Izuki's face as she stares at him with a blank expression. The CPS agents ran away, screaming. Hasashi lays there on the ground, looking deep into his adopted daughter's eyes, and he saw the color red glowing in both of them as he drew his last breath. Izuki just stands there, watching, and when she had finally gotten bored, she walked off deeper into the dark house. A few seconds later, after the agents were running down the street screaming that a daughter has murdered her father, of which this caught the attention of a certain man with white hair. He asked them where did this conflict happen, to which they would tell him where. He gives a light knock on the door, and the door opens by itself, almost like a poltergeist house. He slowly walks in. "Hello? Is anyone there?" He takes a few steps in, and he kicks something. He looks down, and he sees the now dead body of Hasashi Midoriya. He walks further into the house as he hears sobbing. Without turning on any lights, the floors creak, and he hears growling in the distance of the hall. He follows the sound of sobbing and growling. Suddenly, he hears the sound of a child sobbing loudly behind a door. He slowly opens the door, and he hears the sobbing clear as day. This is where the sobbing is coming from. Looking over, in the corner of the room, he sees little Izuki with the shadowy figure guarding her, growling and snarling, threatening to attack the man if he comes any closer. Izuki looks up and crawls closer to the corner and cries louder because she thought that it was a police officer coming to harm her. And with those thoughts, it actually alarmed Hati, the wolf figure, and it attacked the man, causing him to fly backwards, leaving a dent in the dry wall. The shadowy wolf would then walk back to Izuki and on guard again, and the man slowly gets up, raising both of his hands in the air. "Hey, hi there. You don't have to be scared. I won't hurt you. I'm gonna get closer, okay?" He would slowly step closer and then get on his knees. "Hey, why are you crying? What's wrong? What, can't you talk?" Izuki looks at the man with tears running down her face and blood staining her face. "It's okay. You don't have to cry. Here, take take this napkin. He slowly extends his hand out with the napkin, and Izuki slowly and cautiously takes it and wipes the blood and tears away from her face. Seeing this man show her kindness eases her nerves, which made the shadowy wolf trust this man, and she sits down, showing a sign of trust. The man hears the police sirens approaching and says to Izuki, "Listen, I can tell you didn't have a good childhood here. And even with all these heroes and people, no one's come to save you. The world shouldn't be so cruel. Not to you. You didn't do anything wrong." He then extends his hand out and says, "Come with me. I'll take care of you." Izuki then reaches out for the man's hand, and she grabs it, and they all get up and they walk towards the exit of the house. The wolf figure follows behind. "Oh, and by the way, my name is Chigaraki." And that's going to do it for this episode of What If Deku Had a Shadow Wolf. Now, I do hope that you all enjoyed this What If. If you like this What If, give it a like. There is no like goal. I'm just going to keep making this story. I already have like 7 other parts that are written down and ready to be recorded. If you all enjoyed this video, leave a like. As I said before, if you made it to the end of this video, consider yourself #blessed. And I will see you all in the next video. Good night.